Sten, we're live.
And thanks again to Larry, the Liberty guy. Got to get him back on the show. Welcome to In the Dugout with Mike Stenhouse on this Wednesday afternoon, hot summer day here in Rhode Island. Okay, lots, boy, you know, in putting a show together, there's so much to decide what to talk about and not talk about. Today, in just a few minutes, some commentary on the shock inflation news we saw today, the 9.1% year-over-year annual rate. This is bad, folks. We're caught between, because of, as Steve Laffey has been explaining to us for many months, America's and economists in this country are caught between a rock and a hard place. You do this, you get that bad result. You do that, you get that bad result if you try to help this. So we'll explain all that in just a few minutes. Two guests coming up. We'll probably spend most of our show today going back to what our real sweet spot is, you know, talking about parents and their fight against divisive and inappropriate and racial and sexual curriculum for kids. In about 15 minutes or so, we're going to have NICOLE NICOLE on as our first guest. She is the founder and president of a national group called Parents Defending Education. One of her partners is you know, Erica Sanzi is a local partner in that group. NICOLE is a friend of our center, so we have her on. And then after a discussion with her over some national, what's things happening in other states with parents fighting back and defending their rights and defending their students. Then we're going to be joined by Westerly domestic terrorist, if you would, Bob Chiaradio. Bob has been leading the fight against pornographic and divisive racial material in Westerly schools. He'll join in with me and NICOLE for a while, and then we'll talk to him about some local things as well. Tomorrow, interesting day, and a topic we really haven't covered in a long time. Two things we haven't covered in a long time. First, at the end of the show, we're going to have Dr. Andrew Boston back. Now, you know, Dr. Boston's been away for a while. We kind of thought the COVID crisis was over, and his terrific research, the things he was so prescient on for so long over the years, you know, it just, you know, it didn't necessarily apply. But with the WHO now starting to rumble and suggest that maybe government mandates need to be reimposed, with some revelations about a case that Brown University apparently purposely covered up regarding an adverse reaction to one of its students to the COVID vaccine, and the fact that Andrew Boston, our adjunct scholar for our Rhode Island Center for Freedom and Prosperity, was recently canceled, apparently permanently canceled by Twitter. And we'll talk to you about what he's doing to fight back. But the second topic, before Dr. Boston, we're going to have Amanda Wheeler on. Now, you might have seen in the national news that very recently, the Food and Drug Administration under the Biden administration banned most Juul products, Juul. Those are vaping products. Why? It's one of the most, as we've discovered over the years, it's one of the most misunderstood stories out there. It's one of those stories, we didn't realize this a few years ago, but it's one of those stories where the government and the media narrative may be completely off base and may be leading to bad, well thought out, not science-based public policy. Sound familiar? Sound familiar? COVID, climate change, whatever else. So we'll be talking to the head of the National Vape Manufacturers Association tomorrow, Amanda Wheeler, about that. Very interesting topic, and I think you'll enjoy it. All right, let's get going today. But first, just a few quick hits. You know, I got a call today from somebody in Charlestown, and they are concerned about a local ordinance that's going to be scheduled to be voted on tomorrow night, Thursday evening, at the Charleston Town Council meeting. It's apparently a roadmap Rhode Island. Remember that? It's been 7, 8, 9 years since we talked about that. A roadmap Rhode Island ordinance that is of great concern to Charleston landowners. Apparently, they want to build some of these high density complexes, probably including affordable housing in some of their areas. And with that comes lower property values, potentially comes increased crime and traffic and whatever else, drug use potentially. And landowners, private property owners are very concerned. So if you're in the area, if you're concerned, and you live in the Charleston area, we don't have the details on when and where the meeting is, but apparently there's a town council meeting tomorrow night in Charlestown. And if you can make it, and if they can fill the joint, they might be able to convince the town council to postpone the vote, which is expected to pass right now for this new ordinance, which, by the way, was developed by Smart Growth Rhode Island. Smart Growth Rhode Island is basically the Agenda 21 arm in Rhode Island. They were the HUD Sustainable Development arm in Rhode Island. They're all about green, 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 affordable housing, hate private property, hate private property, hate private property. So this proposal, I don't even have to know more. If it was proposed by Smart Growth Rhode Island, we know it's anti-freedom and we know it's anti-property rights. All right, here's a story that I won't spend a lot of time on, but I thought it was interesting because it deals with my past. So this baseball player, his name is JT Realmuto. He's a catcher for the Philadelphia Phillies. And Canada has a law right now that Americans aren't allowed into their country without proof of vaccination. They still have that. And this player says, I'm not gonna do it. So we'll see what happens if they make an exception, but apparently he's not going to be traveling with the team. This is not a Major League Baseball rule. This is a Canadian national rule by the communist Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada. Major League Baseball also, in fact, I saw the NFL. The NFL is going to start their season this year with no COVID restrictions, mandates, or anything. I don't know if Major League Baseball is still doing testing. Obviously, if people do test positive, I'm not even sure what the protocols are anymore in professional sports. But look, this guy's, he said, in this Realmuto player said, I'm not going to let Canada tell me what I do and don't put in my body. And that's the right attitude to take. No government should tell you that in this country or any other country. So he's standing on principle. I respect him for that. And we will see what happens when that comes to pass. Here's another one. Just see this story. This I'm not even going to get into today, maybe tomorrow. That testimony, I'm sure you all saw about that Berkeley professor and Senator Josh Hawley, where she claims and tries to belittle him for not agreeing with her that men can become pregnant. And here in this story, the Church of England, the Church of England refuses to define the word woman. Now, if anybody or any institution should have a simple answer to that, listen, God created men and women. It's biblical. Forget the medical, forget the moral, it's biblical. And what Christian church would refuse to just make a biblical argument? But, well, the Church of England refuses to. They refuse to try to define the word woman. Not a hard question. Biblically, morally, medically. It's not a hard question. Why are so many people being stumped over it? I mean, it really shows you how far we've come. Now, this one I kind of found kind of funny, but again, it just shows how low we've sunk here, right? So this gay couple is going to sue a fertility clinic I think it was 2 males because they must have used artificial insemination or something like that, because the baby that was delivered for them was a girl and not a boy. What they don't realize in making this lawsuit, they just affirmed that there are girls and boys. I mean, we all knew that anyway, but isn't it delicious? Isn't it just delicious when the left eats itself alive and doesn't realize it's eating itself alive? The contradictions. I mean, you got to really be on your game to be able to walk that line if you're a leftist, progressive, woke person, of how to say things without contradicting something else you're saying. And here's the contradiction right here. I don't have to explain it. You can see it. All right, let's talk a little bit about inflation. Here's and what I want to talk about is the lesson here, right? The lesson that state and federal lawmakers must understand. Here's a tweet I put out on behalf of the center earlier today. This 9.1% inflation rate year over year that was released today was much higher than expected. I mean, there were some who were hoping that the 8.5, 8.6 would start falling down. The lesson here for lawmakers is that excessive, indiscriminate, wasteful, persistent, big government spending increases the money supply, whether that's nationally or I would even theorize locally. I'm going to talk about this in a second. I can't find any literature on it, and I'm trying to talk to some economists on it. You know, I got an economics degree from Harvard, so it makes sense at one level for me, but I got to talk to smarter people. But I think you can also have local inflation. It's never measured, but we kind of do measure it in cost of living, right? But anyway, we'll talk about that in a second. So, but when there's too much money out there to spend, and you make it too easy to spend, the velocity at which money is spent, at which transactions occur, at which money is turned over, that must eventually, inevitably lead to higher consumer prices. Now, I've been talking about it with Steve Laffey. I've been talking about it for a year on social media. This is all the left now believes in this thing called modern monetary theory. Modern monetary theory basically says that countries can print and spend as much money as they want. It's only debt. It can be repaid. And the risk of, and the sidebar is the risk of inflation is low. Well, no, it's not. When you put too much money into an economy, whether through government spending or whether it's through excessively low interest rates, and we've had both of those in America, you make it too easy for people to get their hands on money, never mind the government giving it to people, it's inevitable that prices will rise. So this modern monetary theory, we predicted, we told you, I told you, Steve Laffey told you, we've been telling you for 9 months or a year that this modern monetary theory of big government spending will cause a train wreck. And here comes the train wreck. It's happening right now. Now, we talked about between the rock and a hard place. Steve Laffey told us, and I learned a lot from Steve, that a year ago, when inflation was starting to tick up, over a year ago, probably 15 months ago, that the Fed should have acted then. But under pressure from the Biden administration, they wanted to keep jobs and gross domestic product growing. So they let inflation rise, and it rose out of control. It was not the, what was the word they used? It was not the temporary, what was the word they used? The, whatever, you know the word I mean. It was a synonym of temporary. It was not the temporary thing that we were told it was going to be. But that was just wishful political thinking. And now it's so high, it's so out of control. The only way to stop it is to dramatically raise interest rates. So the Federal Reserve is expected in its next meeting or two to raise interest rates by 100 to 150 basis points, either all at once or in 2 successive sessions. which means a 1.5 up to a 1.5 initial just in the next 2 months increase. And if inflation doesn't start coming down, they'll go higher. Now, the problem with that, the rock and the hard place here is raising interest rates means it's tougher for businesses to borrow money, people to borrow money. It means spending will go down. It means capital investments in starting or expanding businesses will go down. Home purchases will go down with higher interest rates. Yes, prices will come down too, but this lack of access to money, this increasingly expensive access to money, I should say, will slow the economy down and ultimately lead us into a recession. Job losses as well. It's inevitable. It's the price we pay. And a recession with the loss of jobs and the lower production is the lesser of two evils compared to runaway inflation. The Fed has to do this now. They should have done something 15 months ago, but this is where we are. Steve Laffey says, and many economists believe we're already in a recession, and we'll see what happens there. Now, one thing to keep in mind that inflation, all right, consumer prices are measured, right, by analyzing the average cost of everyday consumer products such as energy and other items. That's how it's measured. But the root cause of inflation, is too much money in the system. And like we said earlier, the velocity of transactions happening too quickly. So one thing causes inflation. The price of goods measures inflation, but the root cause nationally in this case is excessive government spending in terms of COVID relief, other excessive and unnecessary welfare state programs, as well as the artificially low interest rates we've had up until recently because the Federal Reserve didn't have the courage to act 15 months ago. Now, I have a theory. I'm gonna work with you on developing. I'll let you know as I learn about it. But I have a theory that there can be local inflation. That when a Rhode Island government, because we're measuring inflation right now at the national level. In Rhode Island, we talk about how in the Northeast, right, the cost of living is so much higher. Well, isn't that inflation? Isn't it caused by excessive government spending, too much handouts, too much welfare, people buying stuff without producing stuff, altering the supply demand, making easy, putting money in people's hands? They don't call that inflation. They call it a cost of living. But I kind of think they're the same thing. So I'm going to test my theory. I've got to call into Steve Moore, the great economist at the Heritage Foundation, and inform him. He's a friend of ours. He's been on this show, and maybe he'll come on the show and talk about it with me. And maybe he'll probably shoot down my theory, right? But it's a theory, and I want to test it, and I want to find out about it. And and inflation just makes it so hard for businesses when the cost of energy is high, when the cost of manpower is high, when the cost of everyday goods are high. And it's why Rhode Island continues to rank poorly. So once again, CNBC came out with its state rankings for business climate. And once again, Rhode Island was in the bottom 5. Now, it was dead last a few years ago. All right, but when we improved one from last year, but we're 45th in the country. Just by contrast, neighboring Massachusetts is 24th in the country. I'm not sure their policy is all that different than ours, but for some reason I'm not sure what all the factors are. But look, this, we know we have, a $10.3 billion budget in Rhode Island. You kidding me? Oh, was it 13 billion? What was the number? Yeah, 13 billion. You kidding me? That's twice per capita of what New Hampshire spends. And New Hampshire ranks number 1 in almost, or near the top, I should say, in almost every economic ranking, while we rank near the bottom. Folks, government spending, government handouts, the increased welfare state, money to buy votes in whatever form that comes, to inflation and maybe by another name, a higher cost of living. The union giveaways, cost of unionization in this case, the cost of collective bargaining, all of this leads to increased costs for you and your families. All right, speaking of unions, it's my contention, and I believe it's also the contention of my guest, that they are one of the forces behind this divisive curriculum that we are seeing in schools and that parents are fighting so fervently against. So we want to welcome back to our show. It's been a while, but NICOLE, NICOLE, welcome back to In the Dugout.
Thank you for having me.
You've got a national organization that parents defending education. You've got a local partner here in Erica Sanzi. Just very quickly, tell us about your organization.
Sure. So like you said, we're a national organization. We're a membership organization that wants to give parents both the knowledge and the tools they need to be better advocates for their children. Because as we have seen over the past couple of years of COVID and, ever since, many of the gatekeepers who we thought had our children's best interests at heart absolutely didn't. The teachers unions, the PTA, the school boards, the school board association, they care about their money and their power, and they don't care about our children. So that's why so many of us have come out of the woodwork. Most of us are accidental activists, but we're here and we're not going away because we have to defend our children. And
you're a parent of school-age children as well. Is that correct?
I am. I have a 7-year-old and an 8-year-old.
And are they in public school, homeschool, or private school? Where do
they're going to a private school next year. Yeah, they were.
Public schools aren't just cutting it in your area.
No, overcrowded class size, and the kids were basically feral. I mean, I live in Virginia, and the kids were at home for 2 years, and so they were in first grade and second grade, and most of those children have actually never been in a classroom, and so the teachers had a really hard time, with controlling the kids and actually just making up some of the learning loss because, there's so little. They couldn't do Zoom school for, 7-8 hours a day. They don't know how to read. They don't know how to, they don't know phonics or any of that stuff. And so
hell, I can't do Zoom meetings for more than 45 minutes. Hell, so hey, I want to get back to your comment, my comment leading in on unions in a second, but I was inspired to contact you when I saw you on Tucker Carlson's show last night on the Fox News channel. Did a fabulous job. And my wife goes, wow, is she something else? I said, you know what? I'm going to try, see if Larry the Liberty Guy can get her on our show for today. So, great job on Tucker last night.
Oh, thank you.
And I'm even blanking out on what the issue was. What was the issue you were talking about with Tucker last night? Well,
Randy Weingarten, the head of the American Federation of Teachers, was complaining that schools are too politicized. And so, it's really funny because we kind of think maybe just look in the mirror, maybe don't blame parents. Maybe it's a lot of the things that your union and the NEA have done over the years. So,
well, we put out a report a couple of years ago, and we spoke about it a lot on my show. At their national conventions in recent years, the NEA and the AFT, motions from the floor that say teaching kids should be our first part were defeated. Instead, correct. Motions passed that says, no, advancing the liberal left progressive agenda is our number one priority.
Right. This year at the NEA's annual meeting, they passed a resolution to create an enemies list of organizations that oppose their radical gender agenda. Last year they passed one. They did an enemies list about parents that oppose their critical race theory, race baiting agenda. Other things that they got into, abortion for all, Medicare for all, foreign policy things like support for Palestine. But like you said, nothing about learning loss, nothing about educational.
And Randy Weingarten says that schools are overly politicized.
It's weird, right?
Well, who is she pointing her finger at? Do you know? Even know?
Yeah. So
that's an unbelievable comment.
Yep. So she'll punch us and we'll punch right back.
All right. There's a couple we're going to bring on in about 5 minutes, a local parent advocate, Bob Chiaradio, and I'll bring up the second issue I want to talk about with him. But you're probably aware that in Oregon, some rigged committee was formed to determine whether or not the pornographic material in books like Genderqueer, and again, I'm embarrassed to show the pictures, but hey, if and we're going to talk about the next issue of a parent who was shut down, but this I can't share this for any longer. But this Oregon, well, what happened in Oregon? Tell us a story.
Sure. So this book, Genderqueer, has come up in district after district across the country because parents object to it, their children, they're having to read it or having access to it at very young ages. It is, as your viewers saw, graphically sexual and really, age inappropriate for, I think, depending on the school, children, very young ages, elementary school, junior high.
Appropriate for any K through 12 level.
Right. And so this parent spoke up. He was trying to show it. He was trying to read aloud from it. And
yeah, that's a different story. That's the Florida story. In Oregon, they had this. Yeah, in Oregon, they had, and we're going to get to that in a second too. But in Oregon, they had a committee that actually supposedly studied this, and they decided, you know what, we should keep it to make sure that we're inclusive of everything. I mean, this inclusive idea. So let me ask you this, Nicole, or do you like to go by Nikki? What's your preference?
Whatever, yeah.
All right, either one. Nicole, we'll keep it formal. Where are these books coming from? Are they because we know there are third-party groups funded by private foundations that are pushing these books into libraries and schools and directly to teachers sometimes. We know that departments of education are pushing those sometimes too. What is your understanding of where these books are coming from?
Yeah, you're right. It's coming kind of from all of the above. It's coming from, some of the library associations, some of the private foundations, private nonprofits that are trying to push this agenda, again, under the guise of inclusivity. But when anybody speaks up and says, you know what, I don't really want my child to have access to it, I feel like this is not age appropriate, they're called names, they're shamed, they're called bigot, they're called transphobic. And it's meant to not only shut that parent up, but to send a message to everybody else who holds the same opinion. I don't really want my child having that, you're bad and we're going to come for you too if you speak up. It's meant to intimidate and bully parents who are trying to look out for their child because these are deeply sensitive topics. They're extremely graphic. And I think many parents rightfully have concerns about material like that being introduced to their children at a young age, when they're maybe not developmentally ready for it.
All right, so let's flip over to the teachers for a second. And this is something I don't really understand where the pressure is coming from, because you've got to think that most teachers don't really in their hearts believe that men can become pregnant, that teaching hate of white supremacy and hate of you got to believe that most teachers don't really believe this crap, excuse my French, but yet they teach it and they don't speak out. So kind of a two-part question here. First, we know unions are pushing this agenda. Is it union pressure, do you think? Or do you think it's more pop culture, societal pressure that teachers and school officials are buckling to?
I think it's coming from everywhere, quite honestly. Definitely the unions are pushing part of it, but I do think there are a lot of teachers that really do feel it is their mission. I mean, this is, what Lives of TikTok does, right? It's just showing these teachers bragging about this kind of stuff. We had a tip last year from Oregon. There was a teacher training session in a school outside of Portland, and there was younger teachers bullying the older teachers saying, evolve or dissolve, right? Get with the program, push this stuff.
Evolve or dissolve. Wow.
Yeah. And so, but there's a lot of money. We're seeing foundations fund organizations such as GLSEN, GLSEN, Human Rights Campaign, the Trevor Project, that are going out, pushing resolutions in school boards to adopt this kind of material, coming up with the transgender bathroom policies. And so it's coming from all over the place. This is not just a couple rogue teachers. There's a lot of money that is trying to get this in here and make it the new civil rights issue, which, when parents find out what's going on, there's a lot of pushback and, opposition to this kind of radical gender ideology. It spans political lines, it spans racial lines. And I think for the most part, that's why a lot of what's been taking place in schools has been done behind closed doors, because they know it cannot stand the light of day once parents find out what's going on.
All right, one more question for you before we bring in and are joined by by Bob Chiaradio from Westerly, Rhode Island. I think of the Janus decision, right, in 2018, that said that no public employee can be compelled or forced to pay dues or fees to the union if they don't want to, because their unions are inherently political, as we've just talked about. And why should anybody be forced to pay for a political advocacy that they don't believe in? And while maybe some percentage of teachers believe in this divisive stuff, certainly much of the public doesn't. Probably most of the public doesn't. So look at this. Look at this quote from Thomas Sowell. I'm a big fan of his, the great Black economist. We're among the biggest fools in history if we keep paying people, in this case, I'll say teachers, to make us hate each other, whether it's called by pretty names like multiculturalism, diversity, or gender awareness, or diversity, equity, inclusion. That's what it all boils down to. We're using taxpayer dollars to pay teachers to teach hate. I mean, he's right, isn't he?
Yeah, it's insult. It's adding insult to injury that it's being done to us against our will with our money.
So you would think that a lawsuit, and I don't know if there are any, are you aware of any in the books that are a lawsuit based on the same principles of First Amendment, freedom of can't force compelled speech and all that stuff that applied in the Janus case could apply to public schools as well. I mean, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know if you've got a legal background. I don't know if you're aware of any cases in this, but it seems like the principles are kind of the same, isn't it?
Yeah, there have been a number of cases that have been brought. Alliance Defending Freedom has an active case right now in Loudoun County, Virginia, because Tanner Cross, the teacher, didn't want to be compelled to use students' preferred pronouns. He said, it's against my personal religious beliefs. I don't feel like I don't want to, this is not, I'm not going to do this. They've had other cases, Shawnee State University. So this is something that has come up a lot. And unfortunately, with the Biden administration's just released proposed Title IX rule rewrite, this is the kind of thing that the federal government is trying to mandate up and down every single school. You will not have a choice. You must recognize an individual's gender identity.
How are they mandating that? Through which department, via what program? Are you aware?
It is the Department of Education's proposed Title IX rule rewrite.
Oh, it's a Title IX thing.
It would be Title IX. They have read gender identity and sexual orientation into the meaning of the word sex, where it was not meant to be when the statute was written in 1972. And so there are 60 days now, I guess, as of today, 59 days, for Americans to write to the Department of Education, submit comments to the Federal Register and say, I don't like this. If you want to change the definition, you must do this through Congress, not with a pen and a phone. They're trying to get away with this, and people don't want it. And so we have a comment portal going right now. We're trying to encourage everybody to submit comments to show that this government is going ahead with their ideology, despite the objections of a majority of the American public.
Well, with the ruling a few weeks ago about the EPA basically limiting, cabinet and agencies' powers to create new laws and regulations, might that make this new proposed, Department of Education rule something that could?
No, it's not a new law. It's a statutory interpretation. And so they're just trying to put meat on the bones. I mean, they are starting at least to go through the regulatory process of notice and comment, which is frankly more than the Obama administration did when they just sent out a bunch of dear colleague letters and tried to make policy through sending, nasty grams. So I think it really is incumbent on all of us to get involved in the process and say, over my dead body, you cannot do this. This is not what the statute is.
And would that Title IX proposed new interpretation rule, whatever you want to call it, would that codify biological males competing in women's sports? Is that right? Would it codify that?
Yep. The bathrooms, the locker rooms, the overnight field trips, the boarding schools, all of it. So it's a really
and it would make it a condition, I assume, for any entity receiving federal funding, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And any school that declined to go along with this ideology would be threatened with what's called the death penalty, a revocation of all federal funds. So for universities, that would include all student loans, Pell Grants, et cetera. And then for K-12 schools, we already saw the administration threaten schools that they would pull lunch money, right? The USDA funding of the National School Lunch Program. And so they're going to blackmail, they're going to bully schools until they comply. And that's not how we're supposed to be governed.
It's truly no, and we're not supposed to be governed by tyranny of the minute minority. And that's what we have going on here. It's a minute minority of people hold these crazy views, but yet they are finding a way to implement their agenda. All right, let's bring in Bob Chiaradio. Bob, if you can restart your video. We're not seeing you, but Bob, are you there? I don't know if you've ever met Nicole, or you probably know Erica Sanzi or know of her anyway. Bob, we're not seeing you.
I did start my video though, Sten.
Well, it looks like something's covering your video. Do you have a shield up or something?
Oh, maybe let's see. Anyway,
Beauty of live internet.
I'll work on it, buddy.
All right. Well, we have your voice on that. Well, all right. Can you see the screen, Bob?
I can.
All right. All right. I'm going to share an article and have you both comment on this. So this is the one that Nicole was referring to earlier. So here, and this kind of happened to you, Bob, in a sense. You didn't have your mic shut off, but a lot of the similar things you read from a book in Westerly. Well, this Florida dad tried to read from this genderqueer book in Florida, and they turned his mic off. They said it was inappropriate. They said it would get them in trouble on YouTube or something like that, or whatever the case was. Nicole, first of all, what was your understanding? And it looks like here he is showing pictures of the book, just like your team did, Bob, when you spoke in Westerly. So this, I mean, if you just put you there, Bob, it would be the same thing. But first, Nicole, what is your understanding what happened down there in Florida?
Yeah, I mean, he's basically making the school board read what his child can or should be reading in school. And the school board is so offended by it, they say it violates obscenity laws, that they tell him he has to stop, which really begs the question, all right, if it's so obscene, then why on earth are you making 11-year-olds read it? What is going on?
And Bob, wasn't that your point exactly when you had to be good 5-6 months ago when you did this? It was probably more than that when you did this at a Westerly school committee.
Yeah, it was right? Back in December of last year of 2021, and we had people that were supportive of what we were doing, holding the poster boards up of the book, and believe it or not, 7 of Westerly's worst teachers were trying to block the photos from being seen by people that were at the school committee meeting and watching at home on TV. So I guess the moral of the story is it's okay for our 12 and for 14-year-old high school freshmen to go into the library and peruse Genderqueer, a book that shows, as we know, an adult and a minor fondling each other's genitals, but it's not okay for for adults in the room and watching at home on television to see the book. So it doesn't quite make sense.
Yeah, and those teachers actually stood up and got up from their seats in the audience and went and stood in front of your colleagues holding giant, pictures of some of those depictions in the book. They literally tried to get up and stand in front. Your people just held the signs up higher and you guys prevailed. But at least you were allowed to finish. You were allowed to finish your talk, right?
Well, yeah, I was cut off at the end, but I was allowed to finish most of it. And honestly, it says you guys stopped my video, by the way. But what I wanted to say was, if I had done the same thing that those teachers did to me and crowded around me while I was speaking, trying to violate my First Amendment rights, I must have something covering my camera. Rats.
Yep. All right, don't worry about it. We can hear you fine.
Anyway,
there you go. There you go.
There we go. Hey, Nicole. I would have been hauled out of there and arrested if I did the same thing that they did. So, they pick and choose who they want to apply their rules to. So that's just that's how they roll.
Nicole, I want to ask you about where this fight is nationally, what you're seeing in other states. But I got to give you one real irony here about Bob. Bob's sister is the chair of the Westerly School Committee, against which he is fighting so much. So that must be a hell of a fun Thanksgiving dinner in the Chiaradio family. But anyway,
well, it is, because we're not together.
Yeah. All right, Nicole. So what is happening nationally? Is the woke agenda prevailing, or is the massive parent pushback prevailing? Where's the tide right now? Where do you see it?
Yeah, I mean, last year when we launched, it was many of the complaints that we get, and we have a tip line, were about race. This year, almost everything is about gender. And I think people's eyes are really opened as to the kind of shenanigans that are taking place in school. People are concerned about social and emotional learning, which is just in the bipartisan gun bill, right? There's going to be more funding for mental health intervention. I don't really, frankly, want my kids' math teachers doing, surveys and screening my kid and telling them to keep secrets from mom and dad. That's deeply concerning to me. Where people are worried about, the social emotional learning, stuff that's under the guise of bullying prevention ends up, pushing a lot of the bias stuff, the critical race theory, the gender stuff. And so I think people rightly are concerned about a lot of these things. We're still seeing districts across
Are
the country.
parents winning, do you think?
They are winning. Yeah, there are victories. I mean, even Deep Blue San Francisco, right? I mean, they threw out their school board because they were fiddling while Rome burned. They were renaming schools instead of opening schools. People are sick about the war on excellence. They're getting rid of advanced math classes in the name of equity, and parents are mad about that. And so we're starting to see incumbent school board members thrown out. We're seeing when parents speak up, contracts being canceled with diversity consultants, books being pulled, lessons being pulled. As we expose different problems in schools, it's surprising how many mistakes there are.
Yep.
But we have to start to hold those individuals accountable. The price of liberty is eternal vigilance. And so the battles can be won, and they are being won. It's just not being reported by the mainstream media for some reason.
Yeah, Bob, do you feel like you're winning and making progress in Westerly?
Absolutely. We'll talk more about, the book and stuff like that. But, even on the state level here in Rhode Island, I don't know if you want to talk about this later, but we were very successful. We helped defeat some very bad legislation that Senator Tiara Mack put forward. And we helped pass Jessica De La Cruz's bill.
Yep.
Erica Sansi was instrumental in helping us do that. It was her
And our
mission
center
for the
had a
last few
petition
years.
drive on that as well. Yeah, we'll talk about that later, Bob, after
Yep.
Nicole leaves. Nicole,
Yeah.
do you have a few more minutes? I got two more topics I'd like to cover, but do you
Sure.
have a few more minutes?
Sure.
Because I know you're busy. I mean, hell, you're a Tucker Carlson star, so we thank you for gracing us here in Rhode Island. All right, I want to talk two topics, very different topics. Elections. What are you seeing nationally? Is there potential, like we saw in Loudoun County, Virginia, near where you live? Are parents rising up? Are parents putting in their names to run for local school committees? And do you sense that there could be a shift of the power of balance there?
Yeah, I mean, I will note we are a 501c3,
Right,
don't get
right.
involved in elections.
Right.
But we are seeing this is an issue that is starting to animate people. I mean, you think about polling over the past 20, 30 years, education has historically been like number 8 or number 9 on the list of things that people care about. And now it's up there right behind inflation, gas prices. This is really front of mind for people, because I think that trust between schools and parents has really been broken, right? Between school closures and what the kids were learning when they got back into schools. I think people realize, we've put a lot of trust in these institutions and we've been betrayed. And so I think people are very motivated to get out.
You're here. I know you can't support, but you're hearing about parents stepping up and running for office?
Stepping up and running, all over the country.
Okay.
So
Bob, I know.
people are motivated.
Bob, very quickly and without mentioning names, I understand there's a very strong Westerly slate of candidates as well.
That is correct. And I think we're going to do very, very well.
All right. Here's the last issue I want to bring up with both of you, and then we'll let Nicole go, and Bob, you and I can talk a little bit longer. Our center put out a media release. We did an hour-long interview, and Nicole, I would like to know if you're aware of this American birthright movement. We, for the last year and a half, have been critical of the teachings of social study, the divisive race theories, the anti-American theories, the bastardization of our founders and of America overall. But now there's an alternative that I think a lot of us should get behind. I did an hour-long interview with David Randall, who is one of the main forces behind this on this very show. It's curriculum standard. So now there's an alternative to push. A, Nicole, are you aware of this? And B, is your organization in any way getting behind this?
Yeah, we were on the launch day. I was on a webinar that the National Association of Scholars did. We think it's great because so many parents, they want an alternative, right? You can't just walk into a school board meeting and say, don't teach this stuff. You have to walk in and say, hey, I'd rather you not teach this stuff. Did you know that the 1619 project is factually inaccurate, et cetera? Have you considered these alternatives? And until now, there really hasn't been a lot of alternatives. There are projects like 1776 Unites done by the Woodson Center Hillsdale recently came out with some curriculum. But I think NAS's American Birthright Project is a great new addition to this, because the more resources parents have, the more they realize, you know what, you do have a choice, and you can, there are positive alternatives out there. You don't just have to take the poison that is being, sent down your kids' throats as the default setting.
And do you think your organization will be proactive in advancing this American Birthright social studies?
Yeah, we have a list on our website of curriculum options for parents to look through to figure out what works for them. I mean, as we all know, every child and every family is different. And so what might resonate with one family might not resonate with another. And so as we learn of new curriculums like NAS, we add it to our site so the parents know all the options that are out there. And so they can find something that really fits what their family's needs and values are.
All right, Bob, I'm going to ask you about this in a second, but first let's say goodbye to NICOLE NEILY. She's been more than generous with her time today. NICOLE, thanks again for joining us. We'll have you back on very soon, we hope. Thanks, NICOLE.
Thanks for having me. Okay, bye.
NICOLE,
Thanks, NICOLE, for all you guys do.
Bye, good to see you.
NICOLE NEILY, Parents Defending Education. Bob, I don't know if you're aware, I don't know if you saw our webcast or our interview or our media release on this American Birthright. Are you aware of that?
I did not see it, Sten, no. But I will definitely read it tonight.
Yeah, it's right there. Just if it's not right on the homepage, just go to the bottom of our page. We have a really great search function. Just search for American Birthright and you'll find it. You'll probably find the interview as well. And Bob, I think it's important. It's one thing to be critical, but they know, how the old adage goes, if you raise your hand to suggest something, make sure you're the one to volunteer for it. Well, we've been raising our hand complaining against the anti-American teachings in schools. And I think it's great that we now can get behind something to put forth as the alternative.
Absolutely.
Just at that level, don't you think that would be a great thing for our movement to be?
I really do. I really do, Sten. We were taught, listen, if you're going to complain about something, have a solution.
That's right.
Well, this is one of the solutions in our toolbox that we can use now. So.
Yeah, let me just share a couple of words from it, just for our audience and for you. That right here, the Civics Alliance wants to inspire America's state and education leaders to provide social studies standards that teach American students their birthright of liberty. And that's what the American Birthright is. It's patriotic. This country was founded on the foundational principles of liberty. Yes, we recognize not everybody shared in that liberty from the onset of our nation's birth, but the words that Jefferson and others wrote absolutely made it impossible for the lack of liberty and freedom to all to perpetuate for much longer than it did. And that's why we had a civil war, and that's why we had everything else that has happened. So I really, let me ask you this, David. I mean, Bob. David Randall was the guy who I interviewed on this. How worthy a cause do you think this is? As you know, we have a loose kind of confederation, kind of coalition in this state. We call it the Beachhead Coalition. We like NICOLE's group, we can't get involved in elections. I know everyone's thinking about elections in the next few months and all that. But do you think this would be a worthy cause as a statewide coalition movement mission?
I do. And I would take it a step further, and I would say it is the cause, because all of these things that are going on right now, you have, of course, you have the education stuff that we talk about all the time, but look at, the open borders and the lack of prosecution and the lawlessness of society, and the taking of God out of everything, and the taking over of the mainstream media by the left. This is, as we have said for months now, a concerted attempt to rip the moral fiber and the physical fiber out of this country on which it was built, and to destabilize it. We are it. If the United States falls, it's over. That's how serious, in my mind, this is. Education and the indoctrination and the poisoning of our kids obviously plays an important part of that. But there are so many other components to it. That this is it. Nobody can be that inept, Sten. It's definitely on purpose, and it's an attempt to take the country down. So yes,
well, that's the point. You're exact. Well, and it's on purpose here in Rhode Island too.
Yes.
And here's my quote from that press release we put out, that our Department of Education, empowered by really misguided legislation in 2019, when it was empowered, you have the authority to mandate curriculum standards to each of the 39 school districts in this state.
Right.
And we know that this Department of Education, led by Angelica Infante Green, the director, is all about this diversity, equity, inclusion, this critical race theory type stuff, and this over-sexualization stuff. And as I say here, forcing school districts to adopt social studies standards that combine misguided pedagogical theory, low academic standards, and anti-American teachings. So the coalition's movement in this state, I would think, and you tell me what would be to repeal that 2019 law, remove that power from the Department of Education, and then force the Department of Education to change its curriculum standards into something like American Birthright and away from the divisive teachings and theories that they're putting forth and poisoning the minds of our kids with right now. Your thoughts?
I agree. And I'll tell you why. Anytime the any power is taken away from an elected body, okay, that means it's taken away from the people. That bill,
especially by unelected bureaucrats.
Well, exactly. That bill, which is now law, Senate Bill 0863, I know it by heart, was passed in 2019, did exactly that. It usurped the power of local school committees, gave their curriculum power to a non-elected body, as you said, who became Angelica Infante Green. So in essence, the power was taken away from the people who elected those school committee members. So it is being dictated to us right now. And that is why we must repeal Senate Bill, which is now law 0863, and give the power back to local school committees. Sure, we can look at oversight from the state for, in some instances, but we have to have local control.
Right. We have to have local interest. When I say local interest, parents, students, and other educators take back their own schools.
Right. And Angelica Infante Green and RIDE will tell you, well, we gave all the districts a choice of 3 ELA curriculums. That's a lie.
They're all the same.
They're all the same.
Yeah, they're all the same.
Bill Gates owns the one Westerly has. It's Odell Education. It's garbage. It's racialized and radicalized hogwash.
Well, how about we make it a goal to have American Birthright be one of those options as well?
I tell you, we at least need to have it as an option, right? I mean, we need to have it offered in our schools. Absolutely. This stuff that these kids are learning today, teaching them to hate each other and hate the country and hate themselves. I mean, no wonder the suicide rate is what it is right now. Kids are confused and they're doing it on purpose. It's totally on purpose, driving a wedge between the parents and the kids, trying to make the school the primary influencer of the kids.
Yep. Let me read this to you from our release, because we've decided to partner with them, and I want to know out there, and you can put it in the comments or send us an email at oceanstatecurrent@rifreedom.org. Above all, the American Birthright teaches about the expansion of American liberty to include all Americans, the contributions that Americans from every walk of life have made to our shared history of liberty, and America's championship of liberty throughout the world. Students will learn of heroes of liberty such as Abraham Lincoln, Susan B. Anthony, Martin Luther King, and Ronald Reagan. And a lot of those curriculum standards were derived, believe it or not, from 2003. I didn't know about this. 2003 Massachusetts History and Social Sciences Curriculum Framework. We know that Massachusetts has some of the top rated school systems in the country and overall as a state. Probably these 2003 History and Social Studies framework is one of the reasons why. Wouldn't we like to have that here in Rhode Island?
Absolutely. And to that point, if you look at the RICAS/SAT scores for Rhode Island schools, schools like Barrington, districts like Barrington and that are up at the top in Rhode Island, but they're only in the middle of the pack when compared to Massachusetts. Westerly, for example, for all the money that it's spent, it's third in terms of per pupil spending in the state of Rhode Island, $26,000 a kid, right? So we're in the lower half of the Ricus SAT scores. Barely 30% of our kids are proficient in math and English, and we spend almost $3 million a year sending our kids, Westerly kids, to other schools, to other school districts. So what are we doing here? We're ramming in the DEI stuff. We're ramming in the gender stuff. We're not, the teachers are not being allowed to
SEL
teach.
stuff, yeah.
Absolutely. You know, so we've got it. This education department that we have, it's almost public education needs a complete tear down and rebuild, because honestly, not everybody can send their kids to private schools. We have to make public education work.
All right, so you said what you first said. You said it earlier. So first, you are ready to join me. Let's try to craft something in this state. We're going to talk our business right here in the open. Let's try to craft some goals for this state. Any doubt that many of the other parents groups that are part of our coalition that you're in contact with, from Charahoe to North Kingstown to North Smithfield to Barrington, there's parents groups popping up all over the state, East Providence. Any doubt that they would be as enthusiastic about this effort as you are?
No doubt at all. They're
Okay.
sick of it too. We've had it. Everybody's had it, Sten. And our kids are getting screwed, as well as our good teachers. And there are plenty of them out there too. Our kids are getting screwed here, and we got to put a stop to it and save this country.
All right, I promised you we'd circle back and talk about the legislative bills, the one you helped defeat and the one we helped get forth. First, let's talk. I mean, Tara Mack is a former teacher. Everybody's seen the video. This is who she wants and everything that goes with it. What she had legislation that would teach all of that, plus everything else that you and that parent in Florida we looked at a few minutes ago, and so many other parents and groups in this state are revolting against. They want to codify that into law for the education of our students.
Right.
She is the face of what she wants education to be in this state. Your thoughts?
One word: scary. Very scary. That night, a bunch of us testified and quite honestly, we knocked her around the Senate lounge pretty well that night, and she deserved everything she got. She will not be happy until she turns all of our kids, at least the ones she's not able to have aborted, into her. She's just poison in my eyes. She's poison, and I'm hoping that can I say the name of the candidate that's running against her on the air?
Yeah, we can endorse or not, but go ahead.
Well, I can. I'm hoping Adriana Bonilla just knocks the crap out of her in November and takes her Senate seat away from her, because she
So is
does
it
not.
a two-way matchup? Tiara Mack and Adrian Bonilla? Is there a third party in there?
Yeah.
Or primary or anything like that?
No primary. No primary.
All right.
So-
So as long as we
so there's-
cover both sides the same, it's okay.
Right on. So, all right. So there's the Tiara Mack bill. That was the sexual pleasure bill, which didn't see the light of day. And then
There were a whole bunch of co-sponsors on that too, though. That's disturbing, right? It wasn't just her. If I
well, yeah,
remember.
there were like 10 other co-sponsors on that bill, all Democrats, of course. Then on the other side, on the good side, bills that we testified for was Jessica De La Cruz's 2219 and Representative Casimiro's House bill, which we helped. I think we played a significant role. We, all of us that testified.
Bob, let me just say, that was a true coalition effort. Erica Sanzi, like you mentioned, and I had been fighting for that for years, but hadn't been getting anywhere. But then the parents groups, the Parents United RI organization got involved. We got involved. We put out we had a form on our website that when you filled it out, not only did it kind of sign a petition, but it sent emails to 8 or 10 law. We delivered over 2,000 emails to lawmakers up at the state house. So really, you're right. It was a terrific, one of our rare coalition victories in the state, but it certainly is something to celebrate. And it's certainly was a much needed law to protect children from minors from adult sexual predators.
It goes to show you that people, parents, regular folks like us can make a difference. You know, if you're well versed in what you're talking about, which we all are, and we deliver a compelling fact-based argument, then there are reasonable people in Providence.
Great point.
There are reasonable, and it was a bipartisan deal. So we got together and made a bipartisan deal. It can be done, and it has to be done. So we're very proud of that. And I know the governor will be signing that bill into law, I think a week from Friday. So that'll be a great day to celebrate. So we are taking, to use your words, taking our area back an inch at a time.
Taking back territory. Yeah.
Absolutely, Sten. And we won't give up. They know we're a force to be reckoned with now. They know we're not going away. I want to say one other thing about Mackinac. You brought that up before.
Yep, that's our big sister think tank out of Michigan. Yep.
Westerly, as you know, we are working on that right now. We know that Westerly was in violation of Janus versus AFSCME from 2008.
And their teachers' collective bargaining agreement. Yep.
Correct. They're in violation for over 4 years. We are working very hard and very diligently on that now to put together something that's going to knock NEARI and others right on their tails, because they were wrong. Our district was wrong.
Are they resisting amending their contract to comply with the Supreme Court?
They just signed a new contract and the language is different. So what better way to show that they were in violation than changing the new contract?
Can you send me the new language? I'd like to see it.
Absolutely. Yep, happy to do that.
Because we highlighted Wesley as one of the 8 or 9 that was a major violation in our report. All right, that's a great feedback.
Slowly, you know what I mean? It goes very slowly, some of the things we're working on.
Yeah, I get it. All right, I'll look for that language. Bob, thanks for your time today. Thanks for your fight and being a domestic terrorist. We need more of them like you, the peaceful domestic terrorist.
Yes. And incidentally, this hat, before we go,
oh yeah,
it's my 2013 World Series hat. It's my favorite Red Sox team ever because they weren't expected to win it, and they did.
Was the
Mike Napoli team.
Was my former roommate Terry Francona still the manager then?
He was not. This was what's his name's first year. Farrell's first year.
Okay, all right.
He won it in his first year.
You know that Terry Francona was my minor league roommate and major league teammate, right?
Yes, you told me that. Yes.
Yep.
So anyway, but listen, thanks for all you do too, Sten. I mean, we appreciate you very much.
All right, Bob. Hey, appreciate your time, and we'll talk to you again soon.
All right, take care. Thanks for having me on.
All right, folks, we've reached the bottom of the ninth. Another victory for Coalition, the Beachhead Coalition here on In the Dugout on the Ocean State Current. Tomorrow, I'm going to talk about planned chaos, whether it's the pandemic, but so much more than that. And we're going to have a really interesting guest, Amanda Wheeler, who's going to talk about the FDA, the Federal Food and Drug Administration, that recently canceled Juul, Juul vaping products. These are products designed to alleviate the harm from regular cigarettes, yet there's a war against them. The narrative, like so many other narratives, is misguided in the media by the government. And once again, bad public policy. You probably think e-cigarettes and vaping is terrible. Tune in tomorrow. You'll hear the other side of the story. All right, for In the Dugout, Mike Sten us out. We'll see you next game tomorrow.